Her name is Miriam, the prophetess. And the Chayil virtue that we're going to focus on today is virtue, or to be virtuous. So that top right-hand box. And we're going to be reading several scriptures today. But at the same time, I'm going to charge you to go back and read some of these stories as well, because we're going to walk through the path of Mary's life and her development, coming from a child into her full mantle as a prophetess. Okay? And so the first thing we start doing is we're going to define virtue. And we've defined virtue before, but where it says the dictionary definition of the principle, we previously defined that as to be morally excellent or moral excellence. But I want to add to that another word, which is fruitful. Another word or another aspect of that definition. To be virtuous is to be fruitful or efficacious. EFFICACIOUS. It means you can make something happen with efficiency because of your moral excellence. And when we think about things that women tend to be insecure about or tend to worry about, we have to look at how do we address those things, because even though we're talking about it now, it's nothing new under the sun. Every woman in every generation has been faced with the same challenge as a woman. How do I overcome insecurity? How do I deal with insecure people around me who don't like me, not because of me, but because of what is in them? And so I want to look at Miriam. We're going to take a tour of a timeline of her life. And I'm going to stand off to the side because I just like being like off to the side. I like podiums to lean on. And so Miriam is the first prophetess in the Bible who is a prophetess to a nation. And I identify with her, and some of you will identify with her because you'll get words, or some of you have received words that says you are called to the nations. And so I really want to hone in on the fact that her call and mantle upon her life was big. It wasn't a little mantle. She wasn't a little person in time. Miriam is a big person for us to study. Yet I find that not many people write about her. And it kind of made me mad because I'm like, she's such a pivotal moment in history for women. Yet even the many books that I have on studying about Miriam, they don't even include her. And if you look at some of your books, look and see if Miriam the prophetess is in there. A lot of people don't even teach about her being a prophet in the major and minor prophets. They don't even mention the fact that she was a prophetess. Okay? So let's look at her and give a little bit of background. During the time that Mary was growing up in her tween years, Pharaoh issued a decree because he heard a prophecy. He ordered a decree that all males that were born under the age of 2 in a specific time frame to the Hebrews was to be killed. And he told the midwives, you need to be there when the children are born, when a woman is ready to give birth. And if it is found to be a female, she can live. Nurture her, present her to her mother. If it is found to be a boy, he is to be killed. So there's this murderous decree that's been put out by the Pharaoh. And Miriam is the oldest, between the age of 10 and 12, that's why I called her a tween, of 2 children. She has a younger brother, Aaron. At that time, he's about 3 years old. And her mother and father are expecting a 3rd child during this decree. So they're anxiously waiting, but at the same time, they have this burden over them because of this decree. Midwives are secretly not showing up on time so they don't have to enforce this decree. It's important that we understand that, because when Miriam's mother goes into birth, guess who has to play midwife? More than likely, Miriam has to play midwife to her mother. And so Miriam's first introduction for us is one of midwife. She is helping to bring in Moses, her little brother, during a time where he's supposed to be killed. We then see Miriam having to intercede for Moses because they have to hide him. because Pharaoh finds out that they're having these boys and they're having these babies and they're not being killed, and he's confronting the midwives, and the midwives are like, oh, they like animals, they don't even need us, they just birthing. And he's like, fine, we'll just kill any child under 2 that's a male. We'll just take them to the water and drown them. That was the new decree. And so they hid Moses for as long as they could, and when they couldn't hide him anymore, Miriam's mother told her, she said, I have made this ark, they call it an ark, and she's going to have him put in the water, and then Miriam is charged with following him down the river to make sure he's okay. So now we see Miriam as an intercessor. She's praying over him, she's watching him. So in a very short time frame, in the course of 2 years, Miriam went from being an older sister to being a midwife to now being an intercessor. So when Moses is found by the Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, and she draws him from the water, Miriam is there. She's looking in the to see how everything is playing out. And so she then negotiates with the Pharaoh's daughter. She negotiates with him. She says, oh, what a cute baby. Should I call for him a midwife, a nurse? Should I call for someone to nurse him for you? And she says, the Pharaoh's daughter says yes. Not only does she negotiate for Moses' mother to nurse him, she also negotiates for Moses' mother to get paid to nurse him. So she's operating as an intercessor, as a mediator at a very young age. So it's no surprise that even though we don't hear about Miriam until Moses is pretty much grown and has committed a murder and has fled, gotten married, and come back, it's really no surprise that we see Miriam stepping into a place of leadership. Because from the age of about 10 or 12, she was given these responsibilities that most 10 or 12-year-olds were not responsible for doing. And so looking at Miriam's life, now that Moses is grown and he is charged with delivering the people, it's not just Moses. And so you look at Sister Miriam, right, and her ministry. We call her Sister Miriam because she gets elevated. So that's what we call each other in our church, Sister so-and-so. Sister Miriam's ministry was help birth others and pray for their well-being in the beginning. And when the children were delivered from Egypt, Sister Miriam was right there, praying and interceding. And when they crossed that water, what did Miriam do? She picked up that tambourine, and she began to pray, and she began to sing, and she began to dance, and she went forth an utterance of a prophetic song. And that's the first time we see where the Bible has called her prophetess. All along, from the time she was 10 up until the time the children of Israel were delivered, she was being trained and molded and shaped into a prophetess who was to intercede for a nation. And we only get that from a few verses. And we see her in Numbers when they're delivered. Let me go back. One of the reasons why Miriam did that, do you all know why Miriam did that? Why she picked up a tambourine and sang after they crossed the Red Sea? Most people don't. Dancers should know. If you're a dancer, you should know this. Miriam, in the Hebrew culture, it was tradition when men came home from battle, when men came home from war, for the closest living female relative to welcome them back with a dance and song. Okay? It is a type and shadow of a prophetic declaration of a church. Because who is the closest female living relative to Jesus when he returns? Well, it's us. We're the bride of Christ. When Jesus returns for his church, the glorious church should have a tambourine. We should be rejoicing, singing, and dancing, and uttering prophetic words. We're all going to prophesy. We're all going to sing praises. So that's why Miriam did that. So we see her put this mantle on, and now she's walking in a different authority. She's walking alongside her two brothers. It's very interesting to me that we see her in the book of Numbers after he's grown up. We're not sure of her role in the actual process once they're delivered, but we do see that once they were free, she's the one that comes up with a psalm with Moses unto Adonai in victory. So I call Miriam the praise and worship leader.
Right.
I'm like, Miriam was the praise and worship leader. And that's going to be important because when I go into this a little bit deeper, you're going to see why I call her the praise and worship leader to the nation. Miriam seems to be like in her flow, right? She's the bride of Christ. The bride. She's going forth. She is teaching. She's interceding. She's among the leaders. There's 3 leaders at that time. It's Moses, it's Miriam, and it's Aaron. They are the leaders. If there's a problem, they go to Moses, Miriam, or Aaron. If there's a dispute, they go to Moses, Miriam, or Aaron. If it's a property battle, this is my sheep. No, that's your goat. They go to Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. And it got to the point where it was challenging for 3 people to answer all the questions and disputes and quarrels and bickerings and backbitings of an entire nation. And so in Numbers, in Exodus, we see where Moses is advised by his father-in-law to appoint leaders. And so he says, you're going to run yourself raggedy. Now, we don't know if he's saying that because he's care of his daughter, because Moses is married to his daughter, Zipporah, and they have sons, and he wants to make sure she's not a widow, raising 2 children, single, because Moses is wearing himself out trying to do everything. Or if it's just him using wisdom as someone who had a lot of children who delegated. Either way, he said you must delegate. And so we see here that Moses is then go before God, and God says get elders. So he ends up getting elders, 70 men. In the book, elders were considered to be men. So now you see 70 men. I'm giving you this backdrop because I have to set it up. So just stay with me. So he's 70 men that are elders. So now it's 3 leaders plus 70. You have Aaron, you have Moses, you have Miriam, but now you got 70 more men. So all of a sudden, Miriam is now outnumbered. Okay? Anybody who's ever been the only one in any particular group of anything, you know what that does to you being self-conscious or your insecurities. They start coming into play. Whether you want them to or not, they do. You're the only African American in a group, if you're the only woman in a group, if you're the only 40-year-old in a group and it's all 20-year-olds, if you're the only married person, anytime you're the one and everyone else is different, it makes you feel a different kind of way. You could be the only married person among a bunch of single people and feel one way, and then be with all your married friends and be one single person, you feel completely different. Does that make sense? It's when you're the one that sticks out that's different. And so now we see a shift in the anointing, because now it's being spread out, but we also see a shift in leadership, and we see a shift in responsibility. And anytime there's a shift away, that tends to make people feel insecure. Teenagers say, you feel some kind of way. I don't adopt their language, I just work with them. And we see that happening. And we also see that Miriam is now looking at Moses' wife and criticizing the fact that Moses is married to a woman who is Midianite. Or some Bibles say Cushite. Some of them say of Nubia. Either way, historically they're a darker race.
Yeah.
Okay, historically they came from Ham. They say that's a darker race, Northern Africa. And Miriam starts speaking against his wife. And then she says, furthermore, is he the only one God speaks to? Does he not speak to all of us, the 3 of us? See, if you look at Micah 6:4, if you look at Micah the prophet speaks of the leadership as 3. Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. In 1 Chronicles 5, they go through all the genealogy of sons. But when they get to Miriam's parents, it says children. They had children, not sons. They had children. Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Miriam has been placed in an elevation way before we had the Rosie the Riveter movement, the women's rights movement.
Right.
I really think Rosie Riveter should have been patterned after Miriam, because she was among the leadership of men before the law was put in place as an equal. Yes, he primarily spoke to Moses, but when you look on the account of who their leaders were, Miriam was there. She wasn't just their sister. She was among the leadership. And we know that managing people can be tough. In fact, we also know that it was Miriam who started that rebellion. In the Hebrew, the word spoke, just like in Spanish they have a feminine and they have a masculine, they do in Hebrew too. And in the Hebrew, the translation for spoke against Moses is in feminine. She started it. She started an uprising against her own brother. She started murmuring and complaining. And as I was researching, I was thinking, perhaps she's murmuring and complaining because she's feeling out of place. She's feeling like she's being displaced from the authority that she was originally given. She's feeling displaced because her mother is not there. The only person her father is not there. The only person who she's ever had to lean on is her parents. And now that her parents are gone, she's the oldest. And the oldest, how many of you are the oldest? We bossy. We gonna tell you what to do. We are the second parent. How many of you was the second parent? Yes, ma'am. Second parent. So if mom's not here, guess what? I'm in charge. Okay? And then Miriam experienced something where she was putting her mouth on Moses' wife. Like so many times when people who get married, some of us are married, like so many times when people get married, it happens. You marry into a family that's supposed to welcome you, and the ones that's against you, especially if you're the female and you're marrying the man, the one that's against you is usually the females. The sisters, I don't like her. Her hair funny. She walk funny. I don't like her shoes. I don't like the way she talks. She got a funny accent. She wide. She's skinny. She tall. She short. She got kids. She don't have kids. She don't like my kids. I don't like her kids. Any reason, the family that's supposed to bring you in and welcome you is the ones you're supposed to be able to connect with, sister to sister, mother to daughter. Those are usually the relationships you have to work the hardest for. And Miriam is guilty of doing that to her sister-in-law. Miriam, whose name means sea of bitterness, is flowing out bitter water. Miriam, who came through the water and was the first to pick up a tambourine and praise God for delivering them through the Red Sea while Pharaoh's army drowned, is now spewing forth not life but death onto the very person she should embrace. And I think it's because of jealousy. I think it's because the real issue is no longer does Moses have to come to her to get a female perspective. Which is why a lot of mothers have a hard time letting go of sons. Which is why a lot of times bigger sisters are all up in their little brother's business or their brother's business, because for so long he's come to me asking me advice about dating, asking me advice about, but then when he asked to get a girl, he started asking the girl, and now what's my purpose? What's my reason? Oh, you trying to take my brother away from me? Oh, you trying to take my son away from me? Because they don't want to let go because he has someone in his life that can give him a female perspective. And she's done nothing but been good to him, and now you rejecting her because you lose him. Pettiness. Miriam is having a petty party. She's on a petty program. So what's the real issue? The real issue is her insecurity. Her mother is gone, right? Her dad is gone. They're in a new land, right? Her authority has been now shifted to the elders, so people don't have to come to her as much, right? She's insecure. She doesn't really know where her role is. Yeah. And instead of her focusing on what she has, she's focusing on what she seemingly lost. And so many times we do that. We think what we don't have to offer, or what we used to have to offer, or what was taken away, and we get into this pity party. And then what happens? We start grumbling. We start being negative. We start complaining. And then we pick fights with other women because of our own insecurities. Not because they think they can walk in the room. And I'm guilty too. I've heard the voices in my own head. I am guilty too. I have heard the voices in my own head. Somebody get up and they give a prophetic word. I'm like, well, she prophetic, but she ain't no prophet. I'm going to be real, because I had to deal with this message first. Mm-hmm. I had to deal with it first. I had to ingest it first. Oh, she pretty, but she not all that. And she not smart. You know, take it away from somebody who walk in the room or who come into the atmosphere that you're in, that you comfortable in, and then making them uncomfortable because they stepped on the scene. We do that too often. Or my least favorite thing, those of you who ignore people. I hate it. I hate it with a passion because I've been on the other side of that. That's why when people come into if you're within 10 feet of me, you getting some kind of greeting, you might get a hug, you might get both. Especially if you come in this atmosphere. Because rejection by silence to me is worse than anything when you step into a new place and it's the church and you're supposed to have love among sisters. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't do folk groups. You say sisterhood, but you just hood. No sister about it. It's just a bunch of women being catty. I don't have time. It's not productive. And Miriam, I'm like, sis, what happened? You know, I'm like, sis got one job, right? Prophesy and praise. You got one job, sis. You gonna marry Sephora. Don't God speak to somebody else besides just Moses? That's your brother. You got one job, sis. One. Grumbling and complaining. Why is she grumbling and complaining? She went from being part of a trio to being in a single voice to being among 72 men. She had Deborah to look up to. Felicia talked about Deborah. She had Deborah to look up to. There were no prophets at the palm tree setting the example. She was the example. Sometimes pressure makes us insecure. It's not been done before, and you're the pattern. You're the mold. And God is saying you can't crack under pressure because how many women behind you got to come behind you and be what I'm calling them to be based upon what you look like in that moment that I'm making you. And sometimes we just crack under the pressure. We take the focus off what God is doing and we shift it over there and we go into negativityville. And we get mad because they get counsel from somewhere else. Miriam's mad because Moses is getting counsel from somewhere else. His father-in-law, his wife. All she did was give him babies. You know how we can be just petty. You know, oh, you got him a wife. He done got brand new. Mm-hmm. Like he don't know who I am anymore. You know, just silly stuff. Miriam never got married. We don't have any record of her ever having children. So she was a single woman. And we already talked about how that in itself can cause a stigmatism in a culture of men and put a pressure on her. And she in leadership. You know, we know female pastors who are not married. And we can only imagine what kind of criticism they're under for pastoring the church as a single woman. It's a different kind of pressure. And many times in life, the enemy is trying to make us feel that people around us are more talented than us, smarter than us, prettier than us, more qualified than us, whatever, more. And if he allows that to resonate into a place where you're already feeling insecure, then he has a stronghold and a foothold. Yep. And he will hold on to it and he will continue to build on that little bitty space. That little bit of leaven, the whole lump. And we too often come into agreement with what the enemy says about us and let him play on our insecurities and let him wreck what God is trying to build in sisterhood and moving us forward as a host, as an army, as a force. He's picking us off one by one because we petty and we insecure, and it's all because the enemy done planted a seed that you didn't come into agreement with. We start saying things like, she cute, but her eyes is too wide apart. You know, we just look for anything. Well, we try to discredit people's value. Well, she got that scripture wrong. Oh, that wasn't even in Psalms. That was a proverb. We try to discredit them on any account to make ourselves feel elevated. And Miriam did this, and she was immediately judged. God said, bring them here. All three of y'all come here. Called them into... I laughed when I read this part, but I know at the time it wasn't funny. You ever been in trouble with your daddy? And at the time you scared to death, he gonna kill you? Maybe you didn't have a dad like I had. My dad was military. He was old. He was in the Korean War. If he said he was going to kill you, you believed it. And Miriam was called into her daddy's tent. And it says in Numbers 12, 9, and 10. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Miriam and Aaron for talking about Moses. That's my importation. He left. It says he departed. But when the cloud had withdrawn from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron turned, and he looked at Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. You ever been so mad at your kids you couldn't say anything, you just left the building? God did the first mic drop. He said, you know what? Glory gone. Just left. He was so mad because he's like, you are 3 siblings. Same mother, same father, same leadership, working together. You are a 3-fold cord. And you acting like God left the building. But he left with judgment. I looked up leprosy. I said, why leprosy? Leprosy. These are the characteristics of leprosy. Leprosy takes 3 to 5 years to see actual symptoms. It's what's called an incubation period. It will rest in your body and work before you ever see it. Then it's got this bacteria that slowly grows on the skin. And it's not highly contagious, but if it's left untreated, it will affect you miserably. First, it will affect the skin. Then it will creep into the eyes. Then it will creep into the lining of your nose. And eventually, it'll affect your nerve. And if it's still left untreated, it will cripple the person who has it, making hands and feet deformed. It can also cause infertility. God's judgment on Miriam was to give her leprosy for 7 days. He gave her 7 days to reflect on the bitterness of the water that she was spewing out upon the people in the camp, in the nation of Israel, as a prophet. Because in your mouth is life or death, and you can't have both. So he gave her 7 days to reflect on who she was and her character. See, leprosy, as I was reading, is really an outward manifestation of her character. She had a lack of virtue in this moment where God had to judge her. There was no grace, not like we know it. God gave her 7 days to get her character in check. He gave her 7 days to start walking in the fullness of her mantle. And this is what he did. First, he said, I'm going to address your incubation. I'm going to address all these things you've been dwelling on and harboring in your heart. All these works of the skin or the flesh. This jealousy, this envy, this backbiting, these works of the flesh, we're going to address that. That's why I'm going to affect your flesh. He said, and then I'm going to take all that malice that led to gossip. Oh, we're going to address your eyes. We're going to tune up your vision. Because when your eyes are affected, what you see is obscure. She was seeing through an obscure lens. He said, I'm going to fix that. I got to bring you back into focus of who you are. Because right now, you're not there. You're not seeing through eagle's eyes. And I cannot have you on the team with jacked up vision. Okay? He ain't giving no glasses like I have, but he dealt with her vision. He says, I want you to stop looking at Zephora as being competition. Shift your vision. Stop looking at your sister as being your competition. Amen. Shift your vision. The very person that you're rejecting is the one I've sent to you. The sister that you never had, Miriam, I'm sending you a sister to come along beside you and help you, and you're rejecting her because your vision is messed up.
Yep. Good.
In fact, Zipporah's name means bird. We see later when God set up the Levitical way for atoning sin, the sacrifice was birds. The blood of the birds was an atonement for some sin. He said, I gave you bird first. I gave you grace first. She's here to help you not sin. But you too busy rejecting what you're trying to be in competition with, which is really sent to help you. She's on your team. And that's what we do. That's what we do. And then we wonder why doors are closed. Well, I saw a door. You saw a door, but it's closed because your vision messed up and God can't have you stumbling through the door. You got to be able to walk through in Chayil power. You stumbling through, you don't need to go through the door because you're not going to be ready for what's on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so he had to deal with her vision. He had to deal with the saving grace. He had to deal with her mind. He had to deal with the fact that she was in competition with her brother's affection, for her brother's affection. He says, your eyes aren't even supposed to be on Moses. Your eyes are supposed to be on me. Moses don't have anything to do with who I talk to. Moses don't have control over who God should talk to. How dare you, Miriam, pick a fight with Moses about something he don't have no control over? I can control what my kids do if they go to their dad over me. Like, didn't I tell you to sit down? You just gonna run your butt upstairs to your daddy? I could do that. But to be like, oh, so God just talking to you? Like, I'll be like, you do know I don't have control over that, right? That's above my pay grade. You know? And so he had to shift her vision. Then he had to deal with her nose. I said, Lord, how is he dealing with her nose? If you're the prophet and you're the worship leader, your praise is supposed to raise up to heaven as what, Donita?
So,
I'm sorry, I forgot she had her voice. It should be a sweet smelling aroma unto the Lord. You can't, your worship is an incense. Y'all forgive me for picking on Donita. She my psalmist and I forgot her voice is gone. But that's Miriam's job. Yeah. How you gonna be, So what you're doing is you're not sitting up an aroma, you stanking up the place. You got an odor raising up to heaven. So now the Lord got to deal with you about your fountain. You're like, I got to fix this. You the praise and worship leader. If the praise and worship leader don't have it together, the rest of us going to be messed up. You've had a bad praise and worship leader before. You be like, I'll be glad when he sit down. Does she even know if that key is on the keyboard? It messes with you spiritually because it messes with your frequency to hear God. Then the pastor got to come in. And you're like, look at Bishop trying to clean it up. He's trying to clean up the atmosphere before he preach. Because if the praise and worship leader don't pull it together, the rest of us are affected. And you're like, Miriam, that's your job. Sis got one job. One job. So he got to get that together. And it's funny because in her boldness, she'd been harboring it for so long, she became bold in all the wrong areas. You know, we say when somebody bold in all the wrong areas, oh, she got the nerve to do X, Y, Z. Or, no, she didn't have the nerve to say A, B, C. This leprosy was focusing her on where she was supposed to be bold. I need to check you. I need you to be bold in specific areas and not this one. This is not the one. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, yeah, you got nerve, but it's being utilized wrong. So I'm going to clean that up for you, too. So I done dealt with your skin, I done dealt with your eyes, I done dealt with your nose, I done dealt with your nerve, I done dealt with all the stuff you've been harboring. Let's talk about your hands and feet. Your hands and feet are your mission, your assignment. Mm-hmm. He said, I gotta deal with your assignment and your grace. If you are not in position, you cannot go through the door of your assignment. You cannot go through new doors with your hands extended if you cripple. Mm-hmm. And everything that Miriam was doing was crippling her from being able to walk in the fullness of her mantle. Yes, she was called a prophetess, but she wasn't walking fully and wholly and healed in it because she had to deal with her insecurity. She had to deal with her identity and realize who she was, regardless of how she felt, regardless of what the enemy said, regardless of the fact that she was one among 72. She had to deal with that. Because otherwise, not only was she crippled, not only was she deformed, but she was going to be out of place. She was not going to be able to go into the platform God had already prepared her for. God prepared her for the promised land. That That was her door. God prepared her for a place. But you know what? Her murmuring and her complaining and all those things that she was doing, it was making her unfruitful. So she couldn't go. She couldn't bear fruit. She was infertile. And a prophet that is infertile is hindering the vision of the people. Mm-hmm. And when you are a sister and you are infertile, you are hindering the growth of your sister. You're not only stunting your growth, you're stunting her growth, because God put us together. God never meant for us to be separated. He never meant for us to roll individually. That's why Chayil is also an army. That's why it's a force. It's a host. Yes, you have your individual Chayil, but the strength is in the unity. And too many times we'll break unity for the sake of one and then wonder why we can't get anywhere. Mm-hmm. It's because we haven't focused our mind. Miriam did not have whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are virtuous, whatsoever things be of a good report. She didn't have that scripture to fall back on. That came later. We got that. She didn't have that. You know, and her nerve and her boldness was misplaced, and she would have taken the children into a different place. So many churches today are bold, so many leaders are bold for all the wrong reasons. They have a leprosy mentality. I know some of y'all gonna send me some messages, and I'm gonna say it anyway. Their hierarchy of position and titles, their hierarchy of positions and titles is a leprosy mentality. All the while, they are building the best that they know they can, and doing everything that they know they can to build a platform, not realizing God has left the building. Because he's not into titles. He's not into individuals. He's into unity. He's into a force. He's into a nation. And one person does not make a nation. And Miriam had 7 days to meditate on fixing these things, repenting, or risk becoming paralyzed. We, in 2019, we have to repent, or we're going to stay paralyzed. And it is not God's will for us to be paralyzed. So there's good news. Leprosy can be cured. In 2019, we in our countries, most of the countries, there are still some that suffer from leprosy, but we can be cured. People can be cured from leprosy. Miriam was restored. After 7 days, she was restored. She leveled up because she got all that stuff in check. She became virtuous. She checked her character. She checked her heart. She said she was sorry. She repented. She turned away. She got her frequency back. She got in line with God. She did what she was supposed to do in order to be a leader. It did not matter there was 70 other men. Miriam did what she was supposed to do and played her role and her part until the end.
Right.
So God wants you to realize that this place that he's taking you to in 2019, he cannot elevate you. He cannot elevate you with a leprosy mindset. Mm-hmm. He can't. He cannot. No longer can you backbite or be jealous or be, rogue when it comes to sisterhood and being connected. Your elevation is in your connection. Your elevation is in your willingness to open your heart and release some things. This is how you fight your battles, in worship and releasing, being transparent with God, and telling him everything that you need to be forgiven of. So many times we go before God, we ask him for stuff, but we're not really, truly repentant of what we need to release to him so that he can replace those things. And that's what God is asking us to do. God is saying, these are the things that he's calling out of us. And it's a list. God says, I am calling you to cast off, throw off, to cast off your old thinking, your bias, your sexism, your prejudice, your ageism, your hood mentality, your poverty mentality, your slave mentality, your apostle is my master mentality. your pastor is my daddy mentality and come into focus. He says, too long have the daughters of Zion become stagnant in waiting for someone to acknowledge them and elevate them. He says, I am elevating mantles and gifts, and yes, there are open doors, but until you release and win the battle of your own mind, you're not passing through these doors. He says, because I cannot level you up and take you until the virtuous woman in you arises. Because where I'm taking you, those preconceived thoughts and habits cannot go. I hear the Lord saying he wants us to infiltrate. You can't infiltrate if you have red flags on your life. And your biases, and your prejudices, and your beliefs about other cultures, and other genders, and age, all those things are red flags that he cannot use. Not for this elevation. They won't work in the door that he wants to send us through for changing, for the transference. He cannot send us through if we have those things holding us, because they're going to show who we are. They're telltale signs. He says, so worship and fighting your battles of the mind. Before I close, there are people that say, well, Miriam was punished because she was a woman. Or you see, Miriam was the one that got punished, but did nothing happen to Aaron. And I want to clarify that because that's not true. Miriam had two consequences. One was because of the call upon her life. She could not use her voice, which was the primary call of her life, and do what she was supposed to do by having bitter waters. A prophet cannot have two fountains. So he had to deal with her on her level of the mantle of her assignment. As far as them together, they're murmuring, neither one of them got into the promised land. Neither one of them. Both of them died before they got in, within the same year. I think it was like within 5 months of each other. So Miriam faced consequences because of her assignment. If you ever compare yourself to somebody else and the consequences you face, Lord, why me? You got to look at what is my assignment, the reason why he deal with me like this, and her like that. I asked that question. I don't ask it anymore.
Not no more.
But I used to. Well, how come so-and-so can get away with doing X, Y, Z? How come so-and-so, she's still going to the club leading praise and worship? She's still going to the club leading the dance team. All of them is club dancers. I used to ask God that on the floor of my dance team as I stand there trying to pretend that I'm part of the team. And then, I'm like, they smell like club and bar and hip hop. You know, because I always call them spirits. I say, that's what I call the spirits. And the Lord said, well, they're not going where you're going.
That was it, just fine.
They're not going where you're going. And they didn't. And it's nothing negative about them. It's just you have to realize you have to walk out your own salvation in fear and trembling, and your assignment is your assignment, and your consequences are your consequences. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're gonna be focused on that little speck in their eye with that, and you're gonna have that plank in your eye, and neither one of y'all gonna get through the door. So what I need for us to do is to live out our days thinking on virtuous thoughts, thinking on who God says you are. You are more than a conqueror. You are a daughter of Zion. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. God loves you. The value on your life is far above rubies. You are a virtuous woman. You are to be reverenced. Some of you have brought children into this world. No man can do that. No man can deal with the pain that you dealt with for your bones to separate and a life to pass through. You are pretty powerful. And marvelous are thy works, O Lord. My soul does know it well. Boast in the Lord. Fight your battles through worship. And embrace your sisters.